Hello, everyone. Yes, please welcome on stage Boris Jabes.
Hey, folks. End of the day. Hopefully we can keep this somewhat informal given the size of the room, but I'm really excited to be here. So I'm going to talk to you today about basically how you can do a lot more with your Lakehouse, your Databricks instance than you might think. And if I can leave you with kind of one thought to kind of start us off, this is really a question of leverage, right? I think there's an opportunity with the Lakehouse for the few to affect the many in your organization. And that a lot, of course, has to do with what kind of organization you're in and what kind of architecture you've got, and we'll talk about that, and I'm sure I'll call on you all to see what your setup is like. But let me step back and describe to you how I see the world and kind of how I've seen most companies operate, which tends to be a tale of two cities. So we really have two worlds in technology in most firms. One stack for data and analytics teams and product teams and engineering teams, and a totally different stack for business and operations teams. And it's not that we're at odds or anything. It's just that we kind of live on different planets. So how many of you here, for example, actually work in, let's say, a marketing org or a finance org or a sales org? None of you, right? Oh, two? All right. This is perfect. By the way, you might notice some really weird art in this presentation. I figure I'm at the AI summit, so I got a bunch of AI-generated art for this presentation, so don't be confused by the very, very peculiar style here. So, okay, let's talk about our world, I would say, like the world of what I think of as the Cathedral, the world of kind of modern data platforms. We serve our product, our analysts with really, really high quality data. And we've been able to do that because we have a really amazing platform at our disposal, right? So this picture from Databricks actually I think is really telling. This is an amazing system that we now have at our disposal. Over the last decade, we now have effectively infinite storage, right? We can compute on it efficiently. We can deploy our models to production systems. We can do all of this with code. All of it is monitored. You can experiment. You can create dashboards around this kind of analysis. And a lot of this is powered by what I would say the principles of software engineering, right? Most of you who use these kinds of systems, in my experience, are engineers. And we're trying to build fast, efficient, scalable systems. And this is one of the best, most scalable systems I've experienced in my career. Does this look familiar? I mean, hopefully many of you are on this kind of platform right now, especially if you're at this conference. Well, the truth is, this is what we use, and there's a whole other group of people that think of themselves, I'm gonna say, as data people themselves, and they have a very, very, very different stack. So when you think of teams outside of engineering and product, what do you think of, right? You think of sales, you think of marketing, you think of finance, you think of HR, legal, support, right? There's all these organizations. And they all have tons of people, and they are armed with spreadsheets mostly, and their own tools and applications. And instead of Visual Studio Code, they are living in, let's say, Salesforce or Bamboo HR or Marketo, right? All these other kinds of applications. But they think of themselves as data people. They would say they're data-driven. But they've never heard of Kimball or read Kimball. They have no idea how to manage data as a first-class concept. They actually don't care, right? They don't really care about databases. They don't really care about data pipelines. They have web forms, right? They have emails that go out, and then they use these things like that they call triggers and workflows to build really convoluted systems. But it works. And I would call this the business data stack. which mostly looks like a series of applications connected with a series of wires, and the wires are somewhat invisible. So you can build workflows that look like, when a user fills out a survey about our application and gives us a 7 or more, then let's add them to this Google Sheet. And then, when a row shows up in that Google Sheet, well, let's look it up in our payment system. Let's say we'll look them up in Stripe. And if they're a paying customer, then let's add them to a MailChimp campaign so that we can send them an email about giving us a positive review. That's the kind of workflows they're building in usually kind of step-by-step workflow engines that are all UI driven. And it's great, actually. It's fast. It doesn't require coding skills. You're never blocked on engineering. They never have to call us, right? It works with the tools that they already care about, right? Because our systems don't really plug into Salesforce or Marketo. And they're scared to talk to us anyway. So they're like, this is just better. So it's great. We basically have, I would say, the product and engineer architecture and the business architecture. And it's just two worlds. Actually, you would find many companies are extremely satisfied with this. And I think it's because, honestly, they just don't know any better. And they've just been conditioned that this is all they have available to them. But in reality, things are not good. The business data infrastructure goes wrong all the time. How many of you have received like a crappy marketing email for asking you to check out this feature in an app that you're using that you already use? Like, this has happened to at least some of you, right? It's because there is no center of gravity. There is no core ground truth in the business side of the house. There is no central database. There is no lakehouse. There is just apps and wires connected to each other and a hope and a dream. And so all sorts of things go wrong. I have been working with companies trying to improve this for 4 years now. And I have seen things that honestly are somewhat shocking. And they are from companies that I wish I could name because they would freak you out. These are companies that are in the Fortune 50 that we use every day that make these kinds of mistakes. So I'll just give you some examples. I mean, the duplicate emails about features that you're already using, that I think we've all experienced. But there's also often no deduplication because if you have a system of wires with, someone filled out a form, let's put them into this campaign, and someone else, swiped their credit card, so let's put them into this campaign. Oh, and they're both identified by some non-email identifier, so it doesn't deduplicate. So now you're going to send an email about new feature, and the user's going to get it twice. This happens all the time. In fact, one of our customers used to have their emails go out in sevens. Like they had 7 different database identifiers for all their users. The marketing people just shoved it all into their email. And so everyone was getting the same announcement email 7 times. This is just, people just got used to this. You see companies lose leads, right? So the most classic data pipeline in the business is the marketing to sales, right? So we have people signing up for demos or signing up for a webinar, right? And that all has to get into the CRM. So hey, we can start working those leads. All of this happens in this kind of random wiring, and it goes wrong all the time because, the webinar form is passing in this one field that we killed out of the CRM. No one mentioned that this was going to happen, so it just silently starts dropping all these leads. People only find out 3 to 6 months later, and they wonder hey, how come sales are down? It's leads are down. Is marketing failing? Oh no, turns out no one was paying attention. There's no monitoring. This is not a true data pipeline that's monitored by any kind of professional. And so leads just got dropped. This happens, again, at really impressive companies, I would say. I've seen another one that's really hilarious when you kind of combine this data loss and duplication problems. One company was literally double discounting to their customers, right? They had no consistency on tracking whether a discount had been applied because those are in disparate systems. And so they would double discount, and they were selling a product that's kind of similar to, let's say, Databricks, where you charge by the compute cycle, and they were actually selling their product at a negative margin to some customers. So they're losing money on their product because they were accidentally double discounting. There's just a ton of stuff that goes wrong. And these systems are not designed the same way as ours, right? So when data flows into them and things go wrong, fixing it is also tremendously difficult. You would be shocked to find out how much work is involved in undoing a data import. So let's be clear, this world lives on CSVs. Like at the end of the day, it's a CSV import like 8 times out of 10. And they will accidentally import too much data or the wrong data. You can't undo that. Like that's a whole project in its own. You cannot rewind. There's no historical snapshots of tables. This is all projects that you then have to figure out, like, all right, well, we accidentally put 1 million leads into our email tool. We got to figure out how to remove them. That is not a trivial process. So there's just a lot of things that can be improved. And they don't have an answer on their side. But I think we do. And the Lakehouse is a potential game changer for any organization. So we have this great infrastructure, right? We have infinite storage, basically, at a low cost. It's fast. It's easy for us to use, right? You can use it to drive arbitrary dashboards. You can build it as an amazing pipeline for AI that you push, let's say, directly into an application. But it doesn't have to be limited to that, right? With the ability to have separate workloads and separate compute on the same storage layer, you can actually, for the first time, have multiple people, multiple systems using the same storage substrate. And I think this is underutilized by all of us in the industry because I think we focus all of our energy on, let's call it, really furthering our products, which is obviously great. And if you want to build a recommendation engine for your app, like obviously do that. But there is a really cost-effective way to expand how far this goes into the rest of the business. And they're dying for some of our data. Like, it's not just that this is a better, more scalable platform. There is data uniquely in our warehouses and in our data lakes that people on the business side could really use. And they don't have access to it. And so I go back and look at this diagram again. And it's great. It's exactly what you want, right? This is infinite storage. It's open. It runs on any platform under the covers, right? You get the governance that you need because God knows that gets really complicated at a certain scale. But look at the 4 outcomes listed here. Data engineering, BI, data science, and real-time applications. There's nothing about the business. There's nothing about connecting all these insights, all of our AI models, all of our unified data models into business functions like sales or marketing or support or success or finance, all of whom need a better data implementation. And I think most people, when I tell them this, they kind of default back to, but we have great dashboards, right? The BI function is exactly for that. Hey, VP sales, go look at the dashboard, right? This will tell you how revenue's going and it's correct. Go look at it. But nobody looks at dashboards, right? This is really, we all kind of internalize this and think about it, but don't really do much about it. And even if they did look at dashboards, that is not powering the business. That's at best a weekly or monthly review meeting where you're going to look at the leads falling down and you're going to say, we should do something about that. That is not how your recommendation system works in your application. A recommendation system goes from your ML model directly into the app and powers the user experience. There's no reason we can't do the same. We should power the user experience of our salespeople, our marketers, our support staff, even our finance teams. And that's what reverse ETL is about. It's about saying, what if we could syndicate the data from the Lakehouse directly into the tools that our teams use. And if you can do that, then you can connect them to our source of truth, which is, in my opinion, right, like the Lakehouse has the best shot in all of our companies at being the ground truth, the best version of the data that we have in a company. I don't know where else you'd want to rely on. I don't think any of us would want to say, hey, let's go to Salesforce to get all of our data. Like, I think we pull all of our signals into the Lakehouse because it scales better and we can then compute what we care about on top of that. And there's really like tons of parts of the company that you can affect this way. And I think it's a real shift in thinking about BI, right? We've been doing BI for decades. And I think of traditional analytics as a very slow feedback loop, right? It's about taking data and insights and putting them into a report, and then usually in a batch process, which is not ideal, and then hoping that someone in the company is going to do something about it. And obviously, if revenue is tanking, right, like someone's going to look at that. The big disasters, of course, dashboards are great for. But that's very, very different than taking your analytics or taking your AI models and pushing them directly into the applications where people do their work. So when someone wakes up in the morning on the sales team, they would wake up and see, here are the 3 most valuable leads for you to go work on right now. And here's why. Here's all of the signals we've captured about this company or this user. And that takes it from you being kind of a provider of information to you being a driver of these teams. And I think that is how we get to much, much higher business impact. That's how we can take our investment in the Lakehouse, which is no trivial matter, and extend our reach. And you can do so much with this, right? You can score accounts, right? So you can take an ML model around customers and decide, hey, who should we sell to? Or who's at risk of like churning off our product? That's also super essential. Or who should we cross-sell to if we're in a larger organization with multiple product lines? Like, you want to know who to cross-sell to at the right time. All of this depends on really quality knowledge about our users and the skills that we have at analyzing it or predicting it. You could take your support team and improve their SLA across the board by prioritizing tickets based on the importance of users. And if you've hit a certain scale, that's a huge problem. Like, people are just handling tickets and hoping they're gonna hit them all in time, but if you got millions of users, that's just not gonna work. So there's just a million ways in which, by pushing data all the way down into the systems, we can not just improve them, but like improve the way in which those teams operate and help them see that you can be more automated, you can think more like engineers, which I think is just really, really valuable. And this is something we've been lucky to work with a bunch of customers on, right? All of what I'm telling you I just learned from our users. It's really fun. And I think what ties them all together is you really can't depend on that business data stack when you've reached a certain scale. And I think in the same way that you shouldn't use a Lakehouse for 12 rows of data, it's just not interesting. You may as well just get a Postgres and be happy, or a SQL-like database for all you know. But when you've reached a certain scale, you need to use the right tools. And when you've got millions of users, tens of millions of users, hundreds of millions of users, or events, or billions of events that drive your user experience, we know that we have to adopt platforms like Databricks to analyze the data or predict. But it's actually no different on the business side. You genuinely can't take millions of users and call them every day and hope that they'll buy your product, right? If you have a freemium product, you need to automate that process and use some intelligence. And that's what we can do. We can combine all the intelligence that sits in our Lakehouse and put that to better use on the business side of the company. And that's what these companies do, right? They've hit certain scale that you cannot do things in any kind of manual way. And the data organization, the engineering organizations, has started to kind of take over. Not literally, like they're not doing sales calls, don't worry. This is not gonna cause you to do sales calls. But it does put the Lakehouse at the center of the company. And it takes our data and our insights and makes it the correct answer for almost any question, rather than every quarter going like, how come marketing sends stupid emails and like, oh, well, they've got their own little flow about what the users do in our app, and it's totally wrong. And so we're wasting our dollars and our time and our users' patience. And I think there's a chance, right, basically for us to move from 2 data infrastructures in companies, and let's be clear, the other one is really not data infrastructure, it's just a collection of wires, into 1 data infrastructure for the company, which also means more bang for the buck on our investments. And I think you get 2 things out of this. I think the easy way to think about the one ring is you get to conquer, right? So we get all of the data in the company lives on top of our data infrastructure, which is good. I mean, I think just getting everyone to agree on what the answer to questions is super valuable. But I think, this ring metaphor, I use it also to think about feedback loops. And a lot of work, a lot of what makes a company successful is having an efficient, tight feedback loop. So if you're building a recommendation engine for Spotify, right? That is changing and being recomputed on a daily basis, if not every hour, every minute. I actually don't know what their frequency is at this point. But it's constantly adapting to the user's behavior, right? They don't like these songs. Okay, so clearly the model can be retrained. And if I told you that the way that works is that a human looks at this once a quarter and is like, how many users were happy with the recommendations? We did a survey. And then you're like, all right, well, we should kind of fix the model and like, let's reship it next quarter and see how that goes. You would laugh, right? That is just not how we would operate as a tech company. And that's part of why we're so successful as businesses. But this entire half of the company that we all depend on for our success, they have a terrible feedback loop. So if you generate dashboards, the speed at which that analysis will drive the business is what? More or less a quarter. Because the dashboards are going to come out, people are going to wait till the next meeting at the next end of the month. They'll see maybe something wrong, maybe not. Then we'll start to debug it, and then it'll be a human process of like, well, what's going wrong? Like, I don't know what's happening. And that's another month. And then hopefully at the end of the quarter, you're like, we should make a decision. We should go left when we were going right. And then you kind of see how that goes. And I think it's a feedback loop that's running on a hope and a dream. It's Slack messages and meetings and QBRs and just kind of hoping that we adapt to the new information. And the advantage of the operational analytics approach is that it's a closed system, right? You get raw signals from all of your systems. And they demoed that earlier today, right? Which is like, it's so easy now to do that in a way that it's basically never been easier to get all your raw data into the Lakehouse. You analyze it, you clean it, you model it, you get actual value out of it. And then when you can seamlessly push it back into a destination system, you can now operate on a much tighter feedback loop. And so now you can say, this marketing isn't working, and day by day you can adapt and improve the personalization of your messages. That's what makes a business better. That's what makes all of us better. And I think that's the promise here. That's the real value of doing this, is like just tightening all of our feedback loops. I also don't think it hurts that we get to control all the data in the company. I think that's a nice positive side effect. There is a bit of a downside to this. There is something to kind of watch out for, which is if you do this, if you embrace this, which I highly recommend you do, and like I think you can do it on almost any part of your company. You could go walk up to your sales team and say, do you need some better data to have better phone calls? And they would say, for sure, they'll say yes. You can go to your marketing team and like, do you want better personalization? They'll for sure say yes. But once you do this, you do up the ante for your work, right? So it's bad enough to have an SLA into your production systems, right? And you better not break your ML, like you have apps that depend on it. That's already something we all have to live with. But this is actually just increasing the set of constituents that depend on your data. Like if you screw up a dashboard, it's kind of a, that drawing I had earlier about like no one looks at them, it's something we're also lucky, right? Which means that you're also not going to get in trouble when you break it. And like if you find the bug 2 days later, maybe no one will have noticed. And so you just have it fixed. But when you operationalize your analytics and you put it directly into downstream systems, if you break a model, if you break some of the data, the impacts are fairly immediate and they're external to the business. You might accidentally generate 1 million bad emails. So it's like the pressure goes up on all of us at that point to not screw up. But in my mind, that's the right place to be as a business and as a person in working in companies. Like you want to have a bit of fear. It means that what you're doing is important. But it does mean you need to test more. You need to start staging your data more, which on the business side is somewhat difficult. It's not like the sales team thinks about staging. And you really have to invest way more in data quality. Like there's just, the bar for data quality goes kind of way, way, way up when you do this. But I think those investments are more leveraged, right? It's basically, you're investing data quality one time and everyone gets to share in that benefit. And like I said, you're replacing a system that is so bad at data quality, people will love you for a really long time, even if your data is like mildly bad. And so I think the real thing we can teach our peers in the company isn't just here's some better data, here's how you can benefit from my investments in real-time analytics. It's actually in the kind of data ops or DevOps workflow that we all think of as second nature. The business doesn't see it that way. They are not used to this. They do not version their data models. They do not monitor their pipelines. They do not ever have a concept of rolling back the data that they've deployed, because they don't think about deployment. They only think about triggers and actions and wires going like, hey, like I said, it's like someone filled out a survey, let's put them into this random list. That's really the extent of how they think about their data. And we have an opportunity to kind of push the entire business to adopt the precepts of, let's call it software engineering and data operations. And I think this pays off for all of us. Like the more we invest in this, the better off we all are. And that's, I think, the journey we're all on. And so to me, this is why it's compelling, right? It's not just a matter of doubling your investment or the value of your investment in Databricks. It's changing the way that your company operates to hopefully get them closer to us and to the way of engineering. So that's kind of why I think reverse ETL is so compelling, is just a way of getting more people in the company to adopt our software lifecycle. Thank you. And I left myself 7 minutes for questions, so whatever you like. Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. I think it's streamed, so the microphone is key.
No, it's for the recording.
Right. Appreciate your patience.
Does it increase any egress costs?
Does it increase egress costs? Yeah, I think obviously there's always some cost. I would say there are 2 ways in which this can increase your costs. One is this can increase the amount of compute you do actually, right? Because you might take an ML model and now that instead of having it render a dashboard once a day, you might say, let's have this push data into our customer success tool for churn every hour. So you might start running your models more often. But you can, the data flow part of Census is so cheap and runs on the lowest possible tier of your systems that the actual data movement is the cheapest part, I would say, of our system. I would say the data movement is the most negligible. Yeah. It's not zero.
All right. Thanks a lot, Boris.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.